Yeah, because
You know, you like already have it, so they don't have to do
but
it.
every 2 years you have to be
Yeah.
recertified.
I feel like that would be like a really like.
My
really
security
bad-
guards are working on guys. They're trying every 2
Little
years.
more.
So,
Good.
you
Okay.
do it every 2 years.
I think that would be really cool, like if
Yep.
you just got that athletics and I did mine, like you have to.
Alright, well, the government is trying to put into legislature gun control laws that won't work unless other things are done first. My purpose is to persuade you that the government should not pass legislature with gun control laws that will hinder law-abiding citizens' Second Amendment rights and not solve the actual problem. I'll be talking about what the government plans on putting in place for gun control and why these policies won't work. First, I'll be talking about what the government plans on putting in place for gun control. According to CNN, although not by much, majority of both Democratic and Republican parties back the banning of assault weapons and is pushing for this to pass Congress. And according to Washington Post, back in 1994, Congress outlawed the sale of certain semi-automatic rifles and large capacity magazines. Later, in 2004, that ban was expired. According to the Newsweek, the president is proposing that school teachers be armed with firearms. This proposal has a majority of Republicans agreeing with the president, while over half the Democrats disagree. And according to the Washington Times, Democrats are wanting tighter restrictions when it comes to background checks and purchasing firearms. Senate Minority Leader Schumer states that he knows that not all Democrats are going to agree with this, but is trying to get this and a few others passed. Now that I've talked about what the government wants to do for gun control, second I'll be talking about why these policies won't work. According to the Washington Post, though there was a decline in gun homicide when the ban of semi-automatic rifles and large capacity magazines was put into place, it showed to be little to no effective. When the ban expired in 2004, those rates still continue to drop, proving that the ban did help a little bit, but virtually had no effect since those rates still dropped after it was gone. That same website follows with that. There was a federal funded study that showed that the ban of semi-automatic rifles and large capacity magazines was insignificant. People still found a way to get a hold of those weapons through loopholes, showing that even if you ban those weapons, there's still a way to get a hold of them. Just like drugs, people are still able to find them even though there's a tight restriction and large enforcement on them. The website continues with that the point of the ban was to reduce mass shootings, even though it only makes up a small portion of crimes. Though I agree that these tragedies should never happen and should be prevented at all times, people will still find a way to find harm. There also has to be other factors looked at, like how was the weapon acquired? Even if the government bans semi-automatic rifles, if the weapon was acquired illegally and used in a mass shooting, the ban has done nothing to prevent this. CNN reports that tighter restrictions will prove to be pointless on background checks if nothing is done to change what is put into these systems to have the background checks ran. The law prevents anybody with a mental illness from purchasing a firearm, as it should, since majority of mass shootings and active shooters have mental health related issues involved. NICS is the system that is used to have background checks conducted. This system is strictly a data-driven input system, which means it only holds information that is inputted there. This is a problem because it's reported that majority of states fail to upload the information that is needed that would prevent the mentally ill from receiving weapons, or there are privacy laws that prevent this information from being uploaded. Psychology Today states that arming teachers is a very controversial topic, mainly because there are too many factors and risks involved. Some of the problems involved are the possibility of a teacher shooting a student or a student getting a hold of a weapon. How will the firearm and training be paid for? Majority of teachers are wanting raises because they're not getting paid enough as is. And schools are on tight budgets, so funding this would not seem very practical. On top of that, the training that a teacher would need to do, the continuous training a teacher would need to do to be better prepared for those situations seems impractical with how much schoolwork they're sunk in with. Now that I've talked about why the policies won't work, lastly, I'll talk about alternative solutions. Newsweek.com reports that 60% of people are not happy with the president's proposal for arming school teachers. Instead of trying to arm school teachers and find a way to get them training and have people worried whether or not a student's going to get a hold of a weapon, he should let the teachers focus on what they're there to do and hire armed school police officers. These officers would be trained and have a sole purpose of protecting the students and faculty members. He could propose a law that would, making every school have a certain amount of armed school police. CNN.com reports that Democrats are wasting their time pushing for tighter restrictions on background checks and longer background checks. Democrats should instead vote and push for laws to be put in place to making it to where the state or healthcare providers upload information that pertains to a person's mental health issue. The president should also lift the existing privacy laws that prevents healthcare providers from uploading this information. And the Washington Post talks about Democrats pushing to pass legislature on the expired law that bans semi-automatic rifles and large capacity magazines. Instead of Congress passing this law again, Democrats should propose restrictions rather than just banning them altogether. Some of those restrictions could be along the lines of only being able to purchase a certain amount of semi-automatic rifles within a set period of time. Or Congress could pass a universal background check that would require all firearm sales to be ran through a background check, whether it's private or at a gun show. In conclusion, I talked about gun control, why it won't work, and some possible alternatives. Some restrictions on firearms that the government is trying to put in place infringes on our Second Amendment. Most of those restrictions won't solve the problem either. There are alternative solutions that would satisfy both parties and actually solve the problem.